and welcome to the SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So in this episode, I'm discussing the 2022 DreamWorks animated storybook comedy adventure spin-off and sequel to the Shrek franchise, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, as directed by Joel Crawford. The movie forms the sixth entry into the Shrek universe, coming some 11 years following the last entry, which itself was indeed the original 2011 Puss in Boots movie named after its title character, the daring, the dashing and adventurous Puss in Boots. Puss's latest adventures follows after the events of the fourth movie, 2010's Shrek Forever After, given that Puss's first solo outing was technically a prequel of sorts, at least in part, where we then catch up with the heroic Puss on his latest daring escapade, saving the town of Del Mar from a ferocious giant. However, as heroic as it might have been, Puss, as voiced once again by Antonio Banderas, meets with an unfortunate end, only to learn that he's now on his last life, and so solemnly decides to hang up his boots once and for all, seeking refuge at Mama Luna's refuge for stray cats, becoming a lap cat left to wallow in his own kitty litter of despair. That is until he learns of a treasure like no other, a shooting star that crashed many years ago, fabled to grant one singular wish to those who would dare to take up the quest to find its resting place. So, seeing this as his one opportunity to restore his 9 lives and restart his life of adventure, Puss sets out to steal the map that will get him to that ultimate treasure. However, what then ensues thereafter is a race towards the finish line like no other, with a whole host of treacherous villains, bounty hunters and canine companions hot on his heels, all whilst juggling his fractured relationship with his love interest from the previous movie, Kitty Softpaws, as voiced once again by Salma Hayek. Will poor Puss ever stay alive long enough to live out his last life to the full, or will the journey to obtain the last wish be his last grand adventure? Surely not, for he is Puss in Boots. Now that sounded much better in my head with a Spanish accent, something I'm not going to be able to do, but just think of that, that's the way I sounded that. So, what an absolutely amazing adventure this turned out to be. I had heard nothing but great things about the movie upon its release, but it was overpowered by Avatar 2, released at the same time, that kind of made every other film released alongside it pretty much obsolete. It kind of came, it kind of went. And that's a shame, as this film is certainly deserving of much more attention for sure. Unlike its predecessor, I actually went into this a lot more open-minded, and I was more than rewarded for my efforts. The style and animation takes some real chances for DreamWorks, or as a DreamWorks movie, you know? And indeed, from what we've kind of come to expect from the franchise and the studio today, it does take a little bit of getting used to. But it's just so refreshingly different. It has a kind of real distinct grain, a different aesthetic quality to it, almost like looking at a matte painting at times. But either way, it certainly brought out the vivid colour used in the cinematography and kind of brought some of the wondrous locations that the film uses to life in some new and really conceptualised ways. It does add a different dimension. I think that's a good analogy, but one which I kind of thought really worked very well to kind of with the overall delivery and the overlay of the characters, the story, and the whole movie's drive, giving a real revamped modern artistic appeal. From a story perspective, it actually has quite a lot of emotional depth. As Puss kind of reaches rock bottom, there may be elements, of comedy surrounding his despair, but it is actually handled with quite a bit of sensitivity. Indeed, his relationship with Kitty also had feeling, heart, a more detailed backstory, and one which, continued to haunt Puss throughout the movie. Sort of really filling in those gaps between the last and this movie. Playing very much into the character he had now become, as he now kind of squarely stared death right in the face. It's brilliant to have the kind of banter and the grifting between Puss and Kitty back once more. And indeed, it's when they meet once again after Puss's realisation that he's literally just like the rest of us, you know? That indeed the fun really starts. There's some distinct tension and kind of yearning passion between them, both brought deliciously to life once again by Banderas and Hayek, who fit back into the characters like they'd never left, yet bringing a more discernible, matured reverence to how each have kind of developed over the time between the adventures that we've come to see and pass. In fact, quite a lot of the delivery is much more adult-orientated, I would say, than I'd kind of expected it to be. There are parts that are certainly going to kind of resonate with the younger audience for sure. That is a given. But this is one of the first-ish, recent-ish animations that I've kind of seen in quite a long while that, while aimed at kids, plays more to its adult fan base. A little bit of light casual swearing in a kids' film never really hurt anybody, right? It's bleeped, so don't worry. But it's the fact that they just dropped it in there, and kind of there and everywhere, that kind of tickled me, you know? They certainly took a few chances, which I loved and more than appreciated. You know, it was different. It's still full of Latin energy and zest and brings some amazing characters into play, such as Big Jack Horner, as voiced by John Mulaney, and Goldilocks and the Three Bears, as voiced by Florence, Oliver Colman, Ray Winstone, and Samson Kayo. There is indeed actually some pretty decent talent attached to this, and indeed it did not go to waste. The race to the star, that pretty much includes everybody I've already listed, it sort of kind of reminded me of the classic Wacky Races cartoons in the way very much that it was set out. The film is much darker than that kind of zany comedy, but the antics that evolve along the way, even from the villains, really does strike the same kind of chord. There's certainly some wild and wacky chase sequences along the way to kind of savour, you know? All in all, in terms of tone, it strikes a balance, I think, between being a piece of light entertainment filled with more than a few riffs on Disney's enchantments, for sure. Honestly, it sends them up in some really creative ways, and it doesn't hold back, making a play for some of their truly beloved classics, bringing, in its own way, I think, buckets of magic, you know? With some amazingly immersive and vibrantly detailed animation, balanced, I would say, with some mild horror. Well, actually, some pretty nightmarish scenes, to be more accurate, if I'm honest. Quite a bit of brilliance involved, and indeed more than some unexpected turns. In fact, I was quite actually surprised and amazed that, given that there are so many different plot threads going on here, connections and characters, all in all, the chase for the star, I thought it was going to kind of feel overloaded, you know, top heavy, but the film absolutely made sure that everything had a purpose and that everything would come together in the end. I mean, it is literally just so satisfying. And it did with just such the most emotional send-off that it could. Overall, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish plays to an animation style that is becoming increasingly popular, but utilises it so well to really bring out its emotion, vivid colours, and creative characters. It can be pretty abstract, frantic at times, but it had a real kind of sense of unbound creativity, bringing quite a surreal but certainly enthused kind of mix of comedy and adventure. It actually does have quite an imaginative feel, and the overall aesthetic kind of meshes really well with the vibrancy of the story. It, in fact, has quite an involved story with a number of emotional and quite meaningful threads and development taking place. It actually crams in much more than you might actually think it would, playing, in my opinion, to a bit more of a mature audience than usual. Ultimately, yet again, we have an amazing adventure with a distinctive energy, bringing some wonderful messages about family, friendship, in some unexpectedly engaging and heartwarming ways. There's certainly a tear or two to be had by the end. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Many thanks for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please do leave a like. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, trailer reactions, and other movie-related content. Absolutely loved having you at SciFirst MovieTalk. Definitely love to have you back. Most of all, just thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.